Ladies and gents, from Prussia Ascendant, this is Otto von Bismarck, Prussia Ascendant, Extra History Part 5 by the channel Extra Credits. The northern German states now look to Prussia for leadership, but that power brought increased attention from their enemies. Whenever some state like Prussia is rising up, Prussia is apparently, I'll learn that it's more military type state, where most of the people are somewhat trained in military. So yeah, obviously people are going to panic if some power like that rises up. Bismarck engineered a war with France by what? Now he wants to go to war with France apparently by striking at Napoleon III's pride. Wound up winning a runaway victory to secure Prussia's diplomatic power. Oh, look at that. Prussia, who's apparently, like I said, military type of state, won. So it's going to be a fun video. In the last video we saw obviously how he took some two states from, I guess, Denmark, right? Yeah. One of the states he gave to Austria in the negotiation. He kept another one and just tried to, I guess, nitpick all the issue that Austria was doing just to rile them up. While King is like, stop that, I don't want to go to war. Obviously Otto von Bismarck wants to go to war with Austria. But yeah, that was something. He first like, oh, we are ally. We both are ally. Austria, Germany. Come on, let's just take that place for ourselves. Attacked and just did all this shit. He's really conniving. People in the comments said that I'm somehow seeing him as a villain or saying something bad about him. Now I'm not saying something bad. Otto von Bismarck is a brilliant man. That's what I'm obviously seeing it here. If you see whole my reaction videos, you realize that I'm really admiring his smart and, I guess, brilliant mind, the way he's doing things, and how, I guess, emotionally driven he is. I guess, is that the way of saying it? Because he's really, I guess, has some kind of anger issues in a way. He just, he get pissed off and start to brawl with people apparently. His younger self, the madman Bismarck or whatever that was. So obviously we see that now, time for time whenever, he does things. Obviously he survived, 5 or 6 bullets. Apparently, the guns weren't that powerful at the time that people said. Because I just thought it was one of those things, that, he just got lucky, extremely lucky. That was the case. But apparently guns wasn't that powerful at the time. So yeah, I never thought of that. But yeah, that makes sense, I guess. So, this is just awesome. I don't agree with lots of Otto von Bismarck's, ideologies and what he believes in. Like, he's a bit of a conservative, loves monarchy over democracy. I don't agree with that. But, I don't agree with lots of things that lots of people were thinking at the time. That doesn't mean I'm, not liking him or vilifying him or insulting him or anything. I realize how brilliant he is. I never know that there was somebody named Otto von Bismarck who literally, created Germany that we know of today. So I'm surprised as, I'm reacting to this, like how I've never heard of this guy, and how brilliant he was. So yeah. Remember, people, if you like my reaction, don't forget to subscribe. Check out the reaction. I did this link in the description with all of my videos. Check out the cast wall playlist like history. All of my history videos that I uploaded is in that playlist. I guess check that out. Check out the playlist too, like oldest sarcastic production, internet historian, CGP Grey, oversimplified. And yeah, let's do this one.
Hey folks, before we start, allow me to introduce our newest extra history artist, Nick. He'll be taking over for David, who is now hard at work on our new extra sci-fi series. Say hello. Any increase in power brings an increase in enemies. But to Bismarck, enemies were as useful as friends. With the defeat of Austria and the consolidation of the northern German states into one hegemony ruled by Prussia, Bismarck's eye turned to the next problem: founding Germany. But to do this, he would need to bring all of the southern German states under his control. He knew he couldn't simply annex them by force. He needed a unified Germany, a Germany that felt like a country, not some occupied territory under a foreign rule. And for that, the southern German states would have to come to him willingly, of their own volition. But they had always been aligned with Austria, so how could he get them to volunteer to be absorbed into Prussia? He would need an external threat, something that would make these states more afraid of other nations, and see Prussia as the benevolent protector and cultural brother that they could turn to in their time of need. And what better enemy than France? Napoleon III, who had been willing to stand by and let Prussia pick off its
And
neighbors
his name is Napoleon too, so I guess that's a bonus. Like, look at that, another Napoleon from France is trying to take over everything, and people are like, that's a panicky situation.
back when it was a minor power, suddenly woke up and realized that a power to rival France had just emerged on its border. Already upset about the fact that he hadn't gotten any territory as a bribe for staying neutral in the war between Prussians and Austrians, Napoleon was primed and ready for a conflict with Prussia. But there was a problem. Both Prussia and France needed the other one to be the aggressor. Neither wanted to risk international rebuke or the possibility of foreign intervention in their cause. But Bismarck had a plan. Bismarck always had a plan. His plan was wait until circumstances presented themselves that allowed him to formulate an advantageous plan. So he did. Then, when the Queen of Spain was suddenly kicked out of Spain by revolutionaries, Bismarck knew it was go time. Because when a European monarch vacates their throne, there is always a multinational scramble for succession. In this case, you'd think it would be less complicated because the Spanish kicked out their monarch and were essentially choosing a new one for themselves instead of trying to untangle and war over some Byzantine genealogical tree. But no, they instead decided to offer the crown of Spain to a German prince. Bismarck was all for this. He pushed for Prince Leopold to accept the offer, despite the fact that his name didn't even have Wilhelm in it anywhere. He knew full well that Napoleon III would have to rage against this offer. After all, if Spain ever allied with Prussia, which would be far more likely with a Prussian prince on the Spanish throne, France would be surrounded. King Wilhelm was against this, and even Prince...
Oh yeah, that is true, isn't it? I didn't even thought of that. Yeah, I mean... Napoleon, somebody named Napoleon who's fighting Prussia. So I guess eastern side of France. At the same time, the southern side is also their enemy. I mean, that's kind of, reminiscent about, Napoleon, the first Napoleon, I guess, the original one, where he had to fight on both fronts too. I mean, that is effed up, isn't it? I mean, Britain is, I guess, not the enemy at the time, but Britain is not much of a friend to France. At the same time, if France attacks Prussia, and now Spain is also, friend of Prussia because they have the German king. That's just effed up. And especially, knowing now that Prussia, Germany, whatever, at the time was really militarized state, where, there were more army men there than any other country, I guess, or something like that. So that's always scary.
Leopold didn't see great prospects in being king of a country that had spent most of the last century in revolt, but Bismarck's diplomacy prevailed, and the offer was accepted. All of these dealings were kept a very close secret, though. If France found out too early, the consequences could be disastrous. What Bismarck needed was for Leopold to be proclaimed king by the legitimate assembly of the...
Why would the consequences be disastrous, though? I'm pretty sure Prussia doesn't fear France since they are, badass in military side, like we learned. Only thing they fear is, I guess, backlash from the international community. But Spain is the one who asks for the German king. So, Bismarck doesn't have to get afraid because of that. Spain asked for it. How are we the one who's wrong here? So he can, just openly send that guy to become king or something. And if France attacks, France is the one who's vilified in front of people, isn't it? Did we did anything to create war? No. Spain asked for the king and we gave them that. Anything more than that is just France's fault. They can't say that.
People of Spain before Napoleon could make a move. That way, if France declared war over it, the world would see them as the aggressors.
Yeah.
Everything went perfectly. On June 19th, 18...
Yeah, apparently he is doing that, but I guess making sure that there is no issues along the way. That's why he's doing things hush. Oh, what the hell.
On June 19th, 1870, Leopold agreed to accept the throne. 2 days later, he sent a coded telegraph to Madrid saying that he would arrive around the 29th. But then history turned, as it so often does, on a small thing. A cipher clerk made an error in decoding the message and wrote the 9th of July. The Spanish legislature couldn't be held in session that long, and thus was dismissed on June 23rd, which meant that when Leopold arrived in Spain, there was nobody present to make him king. People started noticing this Prussian prince kicking around in Madrid fairly quickly, and word reached the French papers. Soon, all of France was up in arms. So, not everything went perfectly. But Bismarck now played the spider, waiting silently. He knew that he couldn't be seen directing affairs. All he had to do was wait for the French to offer some insult, and then pounce on that to have the war he wanted. But he didn't factor in Wilhelm. The king had always been opposed to the prince running off and taking the Spanish throne, so when the French outcry flared up, the Prussian monarch put his foot down and told Leopold to withdraw his nomination.
Yeah, I see what's happening there. I guess after the French Revolution, every other monarch in Europe, I guess, is scared because their actions could create revolution in their own country. So they try to avoid things like aggressions to other countries, wars and things like that. They try to avoid that if they can. So he's trying to avoid a war with France because, I don't know, it could turn out to be another revolution there and the overthrow of him, I guess, in his own country. So I guess he's fearing that. That's why he's constantly opposing war. I've started to react to this this series, I guess, a few days ago, and so far I was seeing that kings are trying to oppose war if they can, because otherwise that just means the people rise up, because obviously wars are not good thing. They create lots of issues, and at the time where people are high and talk of revolution, that would be an issue. So I guess that's what Bismarck just wants war, but king are like, okay, chill out, man. I don't want my head getting chopped off or something like that.
This was a huge diplomatic win for France, but like always, Napoleon III pushed it too far. He sent a diplomat to ask Wilhelm to swear that no Hohenzollern would ever sit on the Spanish throne. The king found this mildly insulting, as there was no way he would promise something like that in perpetuity. And besides, he had already pulled Leopold from the throne, and it wasn't likely to come up again. He felt that he had already been perfectly reasonable about this.
Yeah.
So he replied that he could promise no such thing, and sent the French ambassador away. Then he had a quick telegram sent to Bismarck relaying the incident and granting him permission to inform the press. But Bismarck always had a way with vague instructions, and with words. He did indeed inform the press, but the message he passed along to them was carefully edited. It wasn't false, per se. It wasn't even really a misrepresentation. He just omitted some words. Omitted some words in such a brilliant way that when the German people...
I had no idea the modern media took lots of things from Otto von Bismarck too, because this feels so current time media, isn't it? The giant networks like CNN, Fox News and all those people. I mean, they do tell you the actual news, but they tell it in a way that creates somewhat of a controversy, so people just watch it more. So I guess they took it from Otto von Bismarck. Who would have thought?
Read it, they would think the French ambassador had insulted their king. And when the French read it, they would think that the Prussian king had insulted their ambassador. That did the trick. The people were up in arms, and the French were ticked. Paris all the more so because, coincidentally, the telegram happened to come out on Bastille Day. And Napoleon III needed a war. His regime was largely unsuccessful, and his foreign entanglements had been a disaster. He thought that if he could crush Prussia and gain territory for France, he would be back on stable footing. Soon, hundreds of thousands of French troops were pouring across the Prussian border.
Damn.
Bismarck had his defensive war. The French had invaded, and he had the moral high ground. In response, the southern German...
I can't even process that kind of mentality that people used to have back in the day. Like some kind of insult happened here and there, order just goes out and people just march in masses, march to some country they were trying to attack. I mean, you can't even think. I mean, obviously, if somebody in the comment, I think, is already going to write like, this same thing happened currently in this country here and there. But I guess it's extreme rarity nowadays. Like, can you imagine, I guess somebody in some European country just marching to some other country, or any country just marching with lots of soldiers, like hundreds of thousands, even millions of soldiers just attacking country because I guess some newspaper was a bit of rude or something like that? No, obviously because of the nuclear weapons. I mean, I don't like nuclear weapons, but you have to give this thing, like nuclear weapons is the reason things like this doesn't happen. Because war means after war nowadays. It's just ridiculous amount of, devastation that would happen because of war. Because most people have nuclear weapons. So, nowadays it's all end up with some kind of diplomacy here and there, some kind of sanctions here and there. But nobody would march up like that. But, before World Wars, this was the thing. Somebody insulted somebody in the paper and soldiers just march to another country and war starts. And that just feels surreal to me right now just thinking about it.
German states flocked to the Prussian banner, but he played a dangerous game. By letting the French invade the Prussians, he had allowed them to mobilize first. Now the German army had to get into position before their country was overrun. But here Bismarck had the greatest weapon, Moltke. The French had better rifles than the Germans, but the Germans had better ideas about modern war. Prussian observers had studied the American Civil War and knew that a train schedule could be as powerful a tool as any gun. Moltke embraced the idea.
Prussians helped Americans, right? During the Civil Wars or something like that, they trained them or something like that. I don't know. I remember reading somebody's comment like that. I'm not so sure on that part.
Of the railroad and the telegraph. With coordination and these new technologies for movement, he not only got the German army to the front in time, he got more men there than the French did. But he did more than just this. He rewrote the rules so that German units no longer simply marched in great columns and fought in great lines, but rather acted as small units less susceptible to fire. He pushed the idea that, since piercing the center of an army was no longer as much of a concern due to the deadly nature of modern rifles, they should worry less about artillery getting overrun and more about how effective it was in a fight. So he moved his artillery closer to the action and had them working in conjunction with his units. He had a general staff, the only one in Europe, whose sole purpose was to draw up war plans in peacetime and think through all of the probable scenarios of coming conflicts.
Damn.
With these advantages and a superiority in
Talking about preparation, that's a ridiculous amount of preparation right there. If they're the only one who did that. I mean, they are already, militarized country, like, whatever that quote is. Like, some states have government, something like that. No, wait a minute. Yes, some states have military, but Prussian military has state or something like that. So that implies that most people in Prussia is somehow militarized. They have military training or something, and they have lots of soldiers. And now preparation like this. I mean, that's just effed up. This is why Germany was such a powerhouse in World War I, even in World War II.
Numbers, Moltke immediately took the offensive, rapidly pushing the French back across the border and charging into French territory. Time and again, the French reeled before the Prussian forces. Soon, the French armies were falling back, trying to link up with reserves further down the line. But the retreating army was spotted by a small cavalry brigade, and nearby Prussian forces were ordered to move in and cut them off. Unfortunately, due to some wild miscalculations by both sides, the Prussians had just sent 30,000 men to engage what turned out to be 130,000. The French were beleaguered and demoralized, but had an overwhelming advantage in men. The Prussians were ready for the fight, but ended up pinned by the French artillery. In desperation, the Prussian commander sent a message to a nearby cavalry commander saying that the artillery must be cleared. Famously, the cavalry commander said, "It will cost what it will cost," and readied his men. Obscured by the terrain, they burst through the cannon smoke at the last minute, bearing down on the foe, giving them only 1,000 meters to react. The cavalry crashed into the artillery and tore through it, silencing the batteries that had so long hampered the Prussian army. This is arguably the last cavalry charge to significantly change the course of a battle in modern military history. But even 1,000 meters is a long ride when you've got modern guns firing at you. Of the 800 horsemen who set out, only 420 made it back. And it turns out that Bismarck's son was among this regiment.
I was thinking of something like 100, the way things were going, but half of them survived. That's not bad, considering the situation.
It was late in the night of August 16th, 1870, when a messenger arrived to tell Bismarck his eldest son was dead. Quartered only 20 miles away from the battlefield, Bismarck rode like a man possessed to find the body of his son, only to be greeted by his...
He's such a conniving, smart diplomat who, plays things like a chess or something. At the same time, he also has this emotion side of him who, get pissed off fast. He hears about his son is dead without thinking anything, just charges to the, war area or anything. That's something.
Very much alive son, laughing and joking in a farmhouse nearby. He had taken a bullet to the leg and would be out of the fighting, but was in no mortal danger. After a few more hard-fought...
Oh, look at that. You're alive. It's not like I'm important figure or something, like I have important things to do. I guess joking with me is fine at this point.
Victories. The Prussian forces bottled up the French at Metz and forced the surrender of 140,000 men.
Damn.
The French only had one army left to them, an army battered by an attempt to relieve the forces at Metz. But Moltke had no intention of letting this force get away, and in the days following the surrender at Metz, he maneuvered his forces and encircled this final army. A breakout attempt was made, but so exhausted and undersupplied were the French at this point, it soon became clear that a breakout was impossible. By the next day, 100,000 men, and with them the greatest prize of all, Napoleon III, who was personally leading this army, surrendered.
Damn.
France no longer had a real army on the field. Now it was time to think about the future. For Bismarck, that meant peace terms.
Yeah.
For Moltke, that meant pushing on to Paris.
Damn. Moltke is just thinking really radical right now. Screw it, let's take France, let's go to Paris. And Bismarck is like, yeah, let's not go too crazy, other people will be involved. Britain, Russia, everybody will join in. It's gonna be bad news. Moltke is like, I'm the great general, I can do anything. So yeah. Damn, this is awesome. Otto von Bismarck and his brilliance here. Obviously, the way he played the paper and how to word things, so it caused a war. I mean, how many effects this guy had in his life. I mean, he's gonna create Germany, which is already way too big. He manipulated some words on the newspaper, so war broke out between Prussia and France. He's trying to do same thing with Austria. One guy having this kind of effect is just surreal to see that. And this all happened. This is not just some watching some entertainment or something. This is history. This actually happened. This is ridiculous. Alright people, that was Otto von Bismarck, Prussia Ascendant, Extra History Part 5. If you like my reaction, don't forget to like and subscribe. Check out the reaction. There's a link in the description. Check out the cast wall playlist. Check out the end cards, and I'll see you next time.